Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order pursuant to Committee Rule 5B and House Rule 112H4. The Chair announces that he may postpone further proceedings today on any question of approving any measure or matter, adopting an amendment on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered. And without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Our first item for consideration today is H.R. 10, the Scholarships for Opportunity and Results Reauthorization Act. The clerk will designate the bill.
H.R. 10 to reauthorize the Scholarships for Opportunity and Results Act and for other purposes.
I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. I recognize now myself for 5 minutes to explain the bill and why I'm so excited to move forward on this. This is Speaker Boehner's bill. He's passionate about this issue. I have joined him as one of the co-sponsors on this bill. But H.R. 10, the Scholarships for Opportunity and Results Reauthorization Act, or SOAR Reauthorization Act, continues three-sector approach to education within the District of Columbia. The bill provides equal Federal funds to D.C. public schools, D.C. public charter schools, and the Opportunity Scholarship Program. Over the past 12 years, Congress has worked in a bipartisan fashion to authorize these funds. Congress passed the SOAR Act in 2011, providing $60 million annually to improve education in the District for each of the next 5 fiscal years. The funding is evenly divided between the three sectors. However, the SOAR Act expires at the end of the fiscal year of 2017. This past May, the committee held a hearing at Archbishop Carroll High School to review the SOAR Act. The committee heard from Shirley Ann Tomadio, a 9-year scholarship recipient who is now enrolled in the pre-med program at George Washington University. As she testified, quote, "Every child should have a chance to receive a quality education because at the end of the day, we are the future. We want to grow in a world where we can be successful because our education was never limited by our backgrounds, tradition, race, or socioeconomic standing," end quote. And I couldn't agree more. Today, the committee has a chance to reauthorize this program, providing hope in the form of a quality education for children throughout the District. For more than a decade, the Opportunity Scholarship Program has given some 6,000 students in the District the ability to attend private school in their choice. Simply, it works. Last year, 89% of the OSP students graduated from high school. On average, 92% of OSP graduates enrolled in a college or university. This is in stark comparison to the 58% graduation rate for seniors within the District public schools. But the SOAR Act is more than just facts and statistics. The SOAR Act is about power of education to change lives. Take the story of Carlos Battle, as written about in the National Journal in a recent book on education choice. Carlos received a scholarship through the OSP and attended Assumption Catholic School, then Georgetown Day School for high school. As a result of this quality education, Carlos was able to attend Northeastern University in Boston. In fact, his mother says Carlos, quote, "almost surely wouldn't have gone to college," end quote, without the scholarship. Carlos now talks about how many of his friends from time to time in the public schools are, quote, "still in the neighborhood and not doing well for themselves. Some are in jail," end quote. As he put it, quote, "everyone who was in my 6th grade class had the potential to achieve just as much as I did. That's just the unfortunate truth," end quote. The OSP allowed Carlos to take advantage of his potential, and he kept on achieving all the way to Northeastern. This program is about real people. The bill is not only about providing scholarships, it's about providing school choice and educational improvement. The SOAR Act provides the funding for the continued improvement of the public charters within the District as well as for D.C. public schools. D.C. public schools rank at the top of spending per student, yet nearly at the bottom in academic performance. My hope is that the funding will help these schools to continue to improve year after year. In the meantime, though, District children deserve the chance to succeed, and the OSP helps ensure that. Today, I look forward to respectfully debate the SOAR Act in its entirety, but before we do that, I want to thank Speaker Boehner. He has been a leading champion of the OSP during his time in Congress, on and off the field. He has done that in this body, putting action behind words, but as you go off campus and look at what he's done and the support that he's offered, he has been a true champion. I thank the Speaker for his commitment, making sure that American children have access to high-quality education. And I thank him for his tireless effort on this bill. It's a privilege to work with him on this important piece of legislation, a legislation I'd urge my colleagues to support and pass as we can hopefully bring it forward to the floor and debate it some more than there. But now, I would like to recognize the ranking member for his opening statement on the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to be clear that I strongly oppose this bill. H.R. 10 would continue the nation's first federally funded voucher program. It would also continue the effort to undermine the public education system in the District of Columbia. Without a doubt, we must help the district provide a high-quality education for all of the city's children. But we cannot accomplish that objective by diverting public funds to private institutions and away from public schools, which is essentially what a voucher program does. Public funds should support public education. Through my work with the Maritime Industries Academy in Baltimore, I understand firsthand the many complexities of turning around struggling city schools. I know that we will not succeed in meeting the many needs of our public school systems and the students enrolled in them if we divert taxpayer resources to pay for vouchers for private schools. H.R. 10 tries to help a few students at the expense of the vast majority of district children. By dividing the funding it authorizes among D.C.'s public schools, public charter schools, and private school vouchers, H.R. 10 would provide a third of the resources it would make available to only 1.3% of the district's students. That lack of equity is simply stunning. Our focus should be on maximizing the impact of the Federal Government's limited resources to serve all of the district's 47,548 students. Since this bill last passed in 2011, over my strong objection and along party lines, studies of the program have demonstrated that the use of a voucher had no effect on school safety, satisfaction with the school, or motivation and engagement. Previous studies also show that 50% of the students in the first two cohorts of the D.C. voucher program eventually dropped out of the program. I've often said that one of my major concerns with government and in everything I do is I want to be effective and efficient, effective and efficient, effective and efficient. Additionally, students in the program are less likely to attend school that offers, and attend a school that offers support programs for those that are academically challenged or having learning difficulties. And one who came up in special ed, spending my first 6 years of school in special ed, I know how important those support systems are. As a longtime advocate of quality education, I support efforts to improve public schools for all students in a manner that is fiscally responsible and effective and, again, efficient. H.R. 10 fails to improve schools and is not fiscally responsible, which is why I continue to oppose the bill in its current form. And, Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and I think we can jointly take a moment here and thank the number of students who are here and joining us today. We don't often get a host of young people who are coming and witnessing what happens here in Congress, but on behalf of all of us, we welcome you and thank you for your attendance here today. I hope you find that government is an important part of the process, and throughout your lives that you are also a participant on either side of the aisle. We just need good people participating, and so we welcome you and thank you for being here in the audience today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to welcome all of you, and it is so important that you see how government operates. All the members up here, we represent approximately 700,000 people from all over the country, and we do have differing views, but we try to figure out ways to do those things that are in the best interest of all of our constituents. And so, again, we welcome you. welcome you to government. I wish I'd had this opportunity when I was your age. I didn't. First time I got to Washington, I think I was maybe 18 or 19 years old. But again, welcome.
Thank the gentleman. Does any other member wish to speak on the bill? The delegate from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to welcome my own constituents in the office. I particularly thank the parents and the teachers for seeing that they are part of this educational experience. As a mother, I understand and I applaud parents who seize every opportunity, every educational opportunity available to their children. I don't blame them. Along with President Obama, I support allowing our current District of Columbia voucher students, like those who've come to this hearing today, to remain in the program until graduation. However, this markup is for a new program that seeks to attract many new students as well. The bill reauthorizes the program for 5 years beginning in school year 16-17, even though a majority of the D.C. Council, including the chairman of the Education Committee, has submitted a letter to this committee in opposition to reauthorizing this program, and I ask that the council letter be placed in the record of this markup, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, may the letter from the D.C. Council be placed in the markup.
Without objection, so ordered.
Yet this committee is rushing to consider a bill which was just introduced on Monday to reauthorize a program that does not expire until September 30th, 2016, so that Speaker John Boehner has a capstone to his political career. The D.C. voucher program is his pet project, not ours, while at the same time he has stood in the way of what D.C. residents have repeatedly requested from Congress, from budget and legislative autonomy to voting rights and statehood. The Speaker has introduced only 2 bills in the Congress, this Congress, a bill on the Iran nuclear agreement and this bill. Like so many partisan D.C. bills the city faces to further congressional Republican ideology, this bill seeks to impose a program on the district that does not have national support. The deepest irony of the bill before us today is that both the Republican House and the Republican Senate just 3 months ago considered several national private voucher amendments on the floor, and none of them passed. This was not a surprise. The reason, of course, is that since 1970, every state referendum to establish private school vouchers or tuition tax credits has failed by large margins. Those states that use vouchers pay for them themselves, not with federal funds. Yet House Republicans are proposing to continue funding private school vouchers in the district as they are proposing to cut K-12 public school funding nationally by $2 billion this fiscal year. Far from helping D.C. students, Republicans are seeking to reauthorize a program that has demonstrably failed. According to the study mandated by the D.C. voucher law, the program has not improved the academic achievement of students as measured by math and reading test scores, which are the objective and universally used measure of educational performance. Most important, the program has not had, and here I'm quoting from the research, significant impacts, end quote, on the achievement of students who the program was designed to most benefit. Students who previously attended public schools in need of improvement under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Even if the program were successful, it still would not be needed. The district is among the most robust has among the most robust public school choice programs in the nation. Almost 50% of our public school students attend charter schools, which the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools ranked as the strongest charter schools in the nation. In addition, students in traditional public schools may also participate in a lottery system to attend schools outside of their neighborhoods, and 75% of our children are attending out-of-boundary schools. Today, there are waiting lists for charter schools and for many D.C. public schools, but not for the voucher private schools. Although I am a proud graduate of the D.C. public schools and strongly support our traditional public schools, I have also always supported public charter school alternatives, which are accountable to the public for those parents who are dissatisfied with the D.C. public schools. I understand that children cannot wait until traditional public schools meet the necessary standards. Yet, the D.C. public schools have made some of the most impressive improvements in the country by any measure, spurred by competition from D.C. charter schools, not voucher schools. D.C. charter schools have even higher educational achievement and attainment than D.C. public schools. D.C. charter schools outperform D.C. public schools across traditionally disadvantaged groups, including African American and low-income students, and have a higher percentage of such students, precisely the students the voucher program was ostensibly designed to serve. If Republicans want to support D.C. students, they should support our home rule public school choice. Give us money for our charter schools. Support our schools, not theirs. Any new federal funding for education in the district should reinforce the hard work of our city, parents, and residents who have shown the nation how to build a fully accountable public choice program. D.C. residents, not unaccountable members of Congress, know best what our children need and how to govern their own affairs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Given that it's about the District of Columbia, you've great latitude on the time. I would ask members to stay within the 5 minutes. But we'll now recognize the gentleman who's always more conservative than anticipated, especially when it comes to time, Mr. Mulvaney of South Carolina.
I thank the Chairman. I take it that means I don't get the full 5 minutes. I represent some of the best public schools in the nation, and I represent some schools that aren't the best public schools in the nation. But they all have one thing in common where I'm from, which is they are monopoly. Most of the people that I represent don't have a choice when it comes to education. I take that back. I take that back. If you're rich, you do. If you're wealthy, you have a choice. But most people that I represent don't have a choice where their kids go to school. If you live here, your child goes to school here. That's it. That's the end of the discussion. You don't like it? Tough. Figure out a way to pay for a private school or move. That's a monopoly. And what we get out of public education more often than not is the same thing we expect to get from monopolies, which is lower quality at higher prices. In fact, it's more than that. What a monopoly, when you study it in school, what you'll find is that monopolies they make one classic mistake, which is they misallocate resources, which is exactly what public schools do. They take the best teachers and put them in the wrong places. They take schools and teach the wrong things. They take their money and they spend it on the wrong things. I know great teachers who tell me they can't wait to get out of the classroom because they make more money in administration. I have employers telling me that they can't find people to work in South Carolina because we don't teach enough vocational schools anymore. And I know schools that will hire a fourth assistant guidance counselor before they will hire another math teacher. That is a misallocation of resources. But it is exactly what we expect when we have monopolies. We would never tolerate this in other areas of our culture. We don't tolerate it with the oil companies. We didn't tolerate it with the phone companies. We wouldn't tolerate it with airline companies. Why we tolerate it on educating our children, I have no idea. Actually, that's not true. I know exactly why we do, because they're politically active. And it's that political activism that has allowed the education establishment to guard their monopoly as effectively as they had for entirely too long. We have laws against monopolies in every area of our society except education. And it's not going to change, Mr. Chairman, until we break those monopolies. And if this bill can help do that in just a little way, then our kids will be better for it, and I'll support it. With that, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentleman. Does any other member wish to speak on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, quickly, if I could.
Oh, Mr. Liu, California, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am speaking on this because we are not a city council. We're the United States Congress. We deal with issues of war, of trade, of energy policy. That's why I don't introduce a bill to override a local ordinance in Lexington, Kentucky, or some city in South Carolina or in Florida. And it is a waste of taxpayers' money for us to be sitting here dealing with a hyper-local issue of a city. We should let the D.C. City Council do their job. It is not our job. I'm a big believer in local control, as I believe many of my colleagues across the aisle are as well. It would be offensive if the U.S. Congress passed a bill in my hometown of Torrance, the city of Torrance where I live, about some local ordinance issue or some educational issue that should be left up to the states or to the local school boards. We in the U.S. Congress should not be doing this. It is a waste of our time. I don't understand why we're even voting on this issue. We should let the D.C. Elected officials do what they were elected to do. It is a waste of taxpayers' money for us to be even sitting here on this issue. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman, and Mr. Mulvaney gave a, I think, very appropriate lesson in economics, but let me just talk about the practical sense. We saw this same thing in Ohio. 20 years ago, we started a scholarship program in Cleveland, Ohio. 612 districts in our state. Cleveland had the worst graduation rate in the state of Ohio. And we said, you know what we're going to do? They were spending at that time, 20 years ago, almost $7,000 per student. We said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to let 2,000 kids, kindergarten, first and second grade, we're going to give them a scholarship worth $2,250, a third of what was being spent on them in the public schools, a third of the amount of money. We're going to give them a scholarship for the first 2,000 kids. On the initial sign-up day, thousands and thousands of parents were kicking and scratching to get the golden ticket, to get a chance to escape the pathetic schools that were at the time going on in Cleveland Public Schools. And this program started, it's been continued every year. Those kids have now went all the way through the system because we added a grade each year, and another round of kids are coming through. And each time the other side tried to shut it down, you know what happened? Those moms and dads showed up at a rally at the State House, proving one of my axioms about politics. No high-paid lobbyist will ever beat a mom on a mission. They make the case for why this is good for their kids, and we won every single time. The same dynamic is playing out in our nation's capital. These kids right here wanted to get to these schools. There's a waiting list for these schools. The graduation rate in these schools is better than the public schools. I bet the teachers and the parents here want this program to continue. They don't like the fact that it's a 58% graduation rate in D.C. schools. They like the 89% graduation rate. They like the higher reading scores that kids are getting in these schools. Mr. Mulvaney is exactly right. Competition is good, but more importantly, moms and dads want this for their kids, plain and simple. That's why we should renew this. That's why we should continue this. It is just that basic. Every time, this is inherent in American people. Every time they get the chance to choose, Americans like that. It's called freedom, right? And just because, as Mr. Mulvaney pointed out, some families may not have the resources that wealthy people have and can choose to go to a different place, these families like that choice. I say we continue the program. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. The audience is reminded to not be a participant in today's hearing, but thank you again for being here. Does any other member wish to speak on the bill? If not, we're ready to start the amendment process. And as we ask for amendments on the bill, I have an amendment at the desk, an amendment to the bill. The clerk will designate that amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 10 offered by Mr. Chaffetz of Utah. Page 10, strike line 18 and all that
Thank
follows
you.
through page 11.
Thank you. I'd now like to recognize myself for 5 minutes to explain the amendment. Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. The manager's amendment to H.R. 10 strengthens the accreditation standards for participating schools. It clarifies how rollover funds are to be used for the OSP. It ensures the Department of Education evaluates student satisfaction in its review, as it had done previously. and it makes technical changes to clarify certain terminology. It also ensures that evaluators have access to necessary data to conduct the study. Most participating schools are already accredited, and H.R. 10 requires schools that be accredited or achieve accreditation within 5 years of enactment. The accreditation process required by H.R. 10 brings educational and administrative quality control. I would urge our members to support this amendment. It has some other technical changes, but I think it will be a good addition to the bill. With that, I will yield back. Is there any other discussion on this manager's amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I thank you for working with us on the manager's amendment, and I support it.
Thank the gentleman from the District of Columbia. Any other discussion on the amendment? If not, the question is now on the manager's amendment offered by myself. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any further amendments to the bill? The gentlewoman from the District of Columbia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment has two parts. The first part restores the integrity of the program.
Sorry, pardon me. The clerk will need to designate the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 10 offered by Ms. Norton of the District of Columbia, page 14, insert after line 13.
The gentlelady from the District of Columbia is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment, and without objection, the amendment is considered as read.
Thank you. The first part of my two-part amendment restores the integrity of the program's evaluation, and the second part prohibits voucher mills, which have sprung up in the District of Columbia since this bill passed. My amendment reverses this bill's radical change to the method of evaluating the program's effectiveness and restores the long-standing requirement that the program be evaluated using the universally accepted science as before when Republicans agreed upon it. Today, they seem to be proposing a different study method, perhaps in the hope of getting different results, since under the prior evaluation, the program did not improve academic achievement as measured by math and reading tests. In the last two authorizations, Congress has sought to honestly measure the program's effectiveness. Both the 2004 and the 2011 authorizations required the program's evaluation to be, and here I'm quoting from the legislation, conducted using the strongest possible research design, end quote. The program has been evaluated with the gold standard of scientific research, a randomized controlled trial. That is the study compared outcomes of students randomly assigned to receive and those that did not receive a voucher. In contrast, this bill requires the evaluation to be conducted, here I'm quoting, using an acceptable quasi-experimental research design, whatever in the world that may mean, and expressly prohibits a randomized controlled trial. The evaluation will compare voucher students with students in D.C. public schools with similar characteristics, even though in any scientific examination, a randomized controlled trial consisting of students who apply for the vouchers and students who actually receive the vouchers would produce more valid results than whatever a quasi-experimental study is supposed to do. The current program's evaluation points out a randomized control trial, and here I'm quoting the researchers, is especially important in the context of school choice because families wanting to apply for a choice program may have educational goals and aspirations that differ from the average family. A randomized controlled trial reduces selection bias inherent in the research design that the Republicans here propose. Some have suggested that since the program is supposedly successful it is not fair to deny students a voucher by putting them into a control group or a randomized controlled trial. First, the program, according to the scientific study, has not been successful in raising math and reading scores, and therefore there is no harm to students being assigned to a control group. Second, the majority itself concedes that there is a need for an ongoing evaluation of the program's effectiveness because they do require at least some study in the bill. They just have chosen a much less rigorous study design than they themselves mandated in 2004 and 2011 in those voucher bills, which produced results they do not want to own. The second part of my amendment prohibits fly-by-night, storefront voucher mills by limiting the percentage of voucher students in a school to 50% of the school's enrollment. No current voucher student or sibling will be affected by this cap. School vouchers are premised on market forces, competition, and accountability. Yet, ironically, many schools that participate in the D.C. voucher program are neighborhood startups that weren't there before and wouldn't be there now, except for this new federal money. They would not survive without the unconditional financial support of the federal government. It is interesting that we are marking up this bill as many Republicans fight the reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank, arguing that companies should be able to survive.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. We're going to recognize now the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm thank you for recognizing me to express my opposition to the amendment offered by actually my good friend, the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia. I think today we're here fundamentally to look at a scholarship program that has not only produced great results, but also has given choices that should not be limited. And if the gentlewoman's amendment were to pass, it would put in place a cap on particular schools that said that this school is going well and we're going to keep an artificial cap of 50% that says that a scholarship provided to this student couldn't necessarily go to the student where maybe even their sister or brother had attended, their friend or loved one had attended, and yet we put these artificial caps on there. If the gentlewoman's amendment is passed, it's really about reducing choice and opportunity for moms and dads. Now, I say that there has been a lot said about the results and about this scientific evaluation that we've talked about. But, Mr. Chairman, I was with you at a field hearing at Archbishop Carroll School where I saw not one, not 10, but hundreds of bright students that will be perhaps members of Congress, President of the United States, doctors, engineers, and each one of them had one thing in common, Mr. Chairman. They had a hope and a vision for a better future for themselves, but it wasn't just them. It was the moms and dads that were there, that when you looked in their eyes, they didn't feel trapped in a particular situation where they had to go to this school because they lived here or they had to go to this. It was truly an opportunity to be the brightest and best that God had made them. And so I was touched by the testimony. We heard from Senator Scott that particular day, who is an unbelievable testimony of being able to overcome adversity. And the other thing that I need to point out is we talk about all these evaluations and how it's not actually scientific or it's not doing better, but I'm here to tell you that that is not the case. The results speak for themselves, Mr. Chairman. We're seeing unbelievable progress. And I would flip the question. If by authorizing this particular bill, are we doing any harm? And I would say that the very students that we have here would unanimously say that there is no harm in giving them a scholarship that gives them a better opportunity, and that the moms that are here would echo that same sentiment. I also believe that what the gentlewoman's amendment would do would provide this group, this control group, that would unnecessarily exclude certain children from the life-changing scholarships that are available to them today. So I strongly rise in opposition to the gentlewoman's amendment, recognizing the fruit of what has already taken place and the desire for it to continue. And I'll yield back.
Mr. Chairman,
I thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr.
I
Clay.
move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to yield to the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia.
I thank the gentleman for yielding so that I can complete my statement about my amendment prohibiting voucher mills, which obviously, to respond to the gentleman's, my good friend from North Carolina, the gentleman's objection, my amendment would leave students, would have no effect upon siblings, upon people already in the school. As I've said, as in my opening statement, I support allowing students already in these schools to remain in these schools until they graduate. But I don't know why any member of this committee would oppose fly-by-night, federal money going to fly-by-night startup schools that started up the moment that this bill was passed. Many of them are bogus, and were it not for the vouchers, they would not exist at all. Some of them are, they have been exposed in the Washington Post for what they are, and they're well known, and yet are able to attract some students in the neighborhood. It is interesting to note that we are marking up this bill, and competition is being given as the reason, as many Republicans fight the reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank of the United States, arguing that companies should be able to survive on their access to private, not government, capital, and that such government funding distorts the private marketplace. Private schools also should be able to survive on their access to private, not government, capital, as the schools where my constituents have come this morning have survived, the archbishops and the St. Anthony's of the District of Columbia. Government funding to private schools also distorts the market, especially when the Government Accountability Office has noted in 2007 and 2013 in its reports on the D.C. school voucher program that the program lacks quality controls, transparency, and information. So we don't even know anything unless the press goes in to expose these voucher mills. Schools should survive on their ability to attract students with a high-quality education, not because a voucher mill peddles a school in the neighborhood and gets federal money to do so. In its most recent report on the program, GAO found that in 6 participating voucher schools, more than 80% of the total enrollment consisted of voucher students. In a 2012 Washington Post investigation of the quality of the voucher program, the founder of one school where voucher students comprised 93% of the voucher enrollment of 72, said to the Post said to the Post, if this program were to end, this school would end. The school director of another school where voucher students consisted of 100% of the school's total enrollment of 50 told the Post that if the program were to end, they would have to stretch with fundraising to continue operating. I asked that the Post investigation titled "Quality Controls Lacking in D.C. Schools Accepting Federal Vouchers" be included in the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection,
And
so
I yield
ordered.
back.
I thank the gentlewoman.
Would my friend yield for a question before she yields back?
That would be fine.
Be happy to.
I thank the Chair. Would Mrs.
Clay
Norton?
actually controls the time, sir.
Oh, that's, excuse me, thank you
I
very much.
yield to the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Clay. Is this, are running schools are pretty much a local responsibility, Mrs. Norton?
Entirely.
Has the District of Columbia requested this legislation?
The district was not consulted when this bill was put
Did
in.
the D.C.
Did
city,
not request, and the council has sent a letter opposing.
and so the council actually is on record opposing
yield.
the legislation. You're my friend and neighbor. Could such legislation affect my school district, the 10th largest in America, in Fairfax County?
It could not, because the Congress of the United States respects the right of every other jurisdiction in the United States, including Fairfax County, to govern itself.
I thank my friend from D.C. and I thank my friend from Missouri.
Thank the gentleman. Does recognize Mr. Russell from Oklahoma for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to address a couple of comments that have come up about why we should have an interest in a seemingly local issue. The Constitution makes it very clear, Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 17. The framers and founders understood it completely. The District of Columbia does not belong to anyone other than we, the people of the United States of America. Paragraph 17, Article 1, Section 8, the Congress shall have power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district. Why? Because this is the nation's city. It does not belong to any local entity. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Does any other member wish to be heard on this amendment? The ranking member, Mr. Cummings, now recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. As I sit here and I listen to the arguments, you know, it baffles me that there are so many people who think they know what's best for the district. And I can't help but think about a little girl in my district. After we had the disturbances a few months ago, one of the things that this little girl said she must have been about a 10th grader, and it was very upsetting. She said, you know, it's my turn. She said, you've already had your turn. It's my turn. She was talking to a group of preachers, and she talked about how she was reading from a book, a history book, where the copyright was 1968. And there's something wrong with the picture. And I think this is happening all over the country in many areas, particularly where poor and African-American students are. A lot of times what is happening, sadly, is the dollars that Ms. Norton talks about that needs to be going into the public schools are actually being pulled out of those schools. And for the life of me, you know, when I think about what she just said about fly-by-night institutions, and apparently this has been documented, and the idea that we would be a part of that, and then I hear about austerity, and I hear about how we got to have money for this and that, and you know, I often wonder about, you know, what we would do in our own districts. And would we do this same thing? And I guess education is a big deal for me. It's a big deal because of my background, having been, as I said a little bit earlier, tossed away early in life, told that I would never be able to read or write, placed in special education from the 1st to the 6th grade, but yet ending up a Phi Beta Kappa and a member of the Congress of the United States of America through public schools. Public schools. And, you know, I believe in public schools, but I believe that we have to do everything that in our power to make them the very, very best that they can be. And I've often said that the greatest threat to our national security, the greatest threat, you know, we talk about all these, the terrorists and all these folks, but the greatest threat to our national security is our failure to properly educate every single one of our children. And so I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression that there are folks up here that don't care about these beautiful children who are sitting in this audience. We care about them and we love them. And we realize that they have wonderful gifts to offer to the world. We've got that. But you know what? For every one of them, there are thousands more throughout this country who may not get those kind of opportunities. And that's what this discussion is all about, trying to make sure that every child, I want for every one of those children, I want them to have what I would want for my own children. I want them to be able to deliver their gifts to the world. The most important thing an adult can do is help a child figure out what their gifts are and then help them nurture those gifts so that they can deliver them to the world. And so I support the gentlelady's amendment. We should not be a part of these mills that you talk about and people who create an entity overnight to take advantage of hard-earned taxpayer dollars. And with that, Mr. Chairman, unless the gentlelady has something else to say, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mica, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to speak in favor of Ms. Norton's amendment. I want to speak in, I'm not going to vote for it, but I'm going to speak in favor of it because I think what we should do is end the opportunities for these children, particularly in the District of Columbia. When we get to 50% of the vouchers, that next kid is not going to be allowed into the voucher program. We've got to end this. And it is the district's responsibility or the Congress' responsibility under the Constitution, I guess as Mr. Russell pointed out, to be responsible. So we should be responsible to the taxpayers out there. Don't put another penny in the District of Columbia. Don't put another kid in school. Don't give a kid, now listen to this, when you participate in this voucher program, 90% of the kids graduate. In the rest of the schools, it's 58%. I'll be darned if I want to give those kids 32% advantage to graduate from school. So let's pass the Norton Amendment. Let's save federal taxpayer dollars. Let's make sure that we end the parents' choice to give their kids a chance. Let's make sure we give the students no opportunity to succeed and graduate. The graduation rate. Yes, let's pass the Norton Amendment. We want to cut off the opportunity, cut those vouchers out, save taxpayers money.
Would gentleman yield?
No. But I urge you to vote for the Norton Amendment. It's a great amendment to ruin the lives of more kids in the District of Columbia. And I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Michigan is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. My political career included school board. I started off as a PTA mom and was elected to the local school board. So serving as a member of the school board and eventually being the president of the school board, I'm very passionate about public education. Being born and raised in the city of Detroit, my grandmother, who did not have a car, who didn't have a high school education, but was very passionate about my education. We were totally dependent on our local public school. My grandmother did everything in her power to ensure I had the best educational opportunity, but her tax dollars and her faith in our local school was extremely dependent upon them being partners with her for me to be educated. Whenever we have this discussion about vouchers, I always push back on the premise of, unless you're increasing dollars for education, unless you are increasing and having a separate fund to give vouchers, it is inappropriate, and you are putting those most at risk in a situation where you're declining the resources for public school systems. And I feel fundamentally that we, in these United States, with our Constitution and with us being the Congress of the United States enacting laws and policies, that we make a commitment that every citizen of these United States will get a quality education to live the American dream, to climb that ladder to success. And the only way to climb that ladder is through education. And when you start diluting the funding for those who often are the most at risk, that brilliant child who was born in a situation that they had no control over, but is just so brilliant, just need the tools and the resources. There are parents who have options, who has cars. There are some children that are born with parents who do not have the skills and sometimes don't even have the compassion to care about their children's education. But that local public school empowers that child and give them in a walking and accessible way a place where they can learn. It's a slippery slope here in America where we keep diluting the one pot of dollars. I absolutely embrace the fact that I can have a choice of where I send my child. But I'm also extremely passionate about that child that we seem to overlook, who don't have the options of a parent who will invest and do anything in their power to get that child in the best environment. I'm also passionate about that child who their parents may not have the resources to take them to another school, or some cases don't even have them the understanding of the system to go through the process to put their child in a better environment. I say to this Congress, and I said to my city, and I say repeatedly to every educational discussion, vouchers is a good thing if you are not diluting the funding for our public school system. And today, as we talk about crime, when we talk about the high number of people being in prison, and we have a common denominator, and that are those children are not educated. Those children mostly don't even have a high school education, and so they have limited, in their mind, opportunities to be successful, and they resort to crime, which is readily available in some communities. If we really are committed to bringing America to the competitive edge in education with other countries, we must stop just making random statements that we'll have vouchers and do not make the commitment to fund it and fund our educational system and public schools. Thank you, and I yield back my time.
Before the gentlewoman yields back, will she yield to me for a moment?
I think so.
I'll be nice.
Okay.
This does not dilute the dollars from my vantage point. These are new dollars, additional dollars. We're authorizing $300 million over 5 years that gets separated into 3 different accounts that wouldn't otherwise be coming to the district. And I also would appreciate some consideration from Utah, where I'm coming from, has the lowest per pupil spending in the nation. It's not something we're proud about, but we have to deal with the fact that our per pupil spending is $6,441 for the 2011, 2012. In Washington, D.C., the per pupil spending is $19,847. 300% more money goes to a student in Washington, D.C. than it does in Utah. And yet we're here trying to pass a bill that would actually even add money to the pot that provides these scholarships. So that's where I'm coming.
Would the gentleman yield?
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that, but in that same vein, the cost of living in Utah compared to Washington, D.C., I think we're talking apples and oranges. But
Understood, but it's not 300%. It's not 300%.
Even the pay, the quality of life that you have to have money to raise. But I want to make this point, if you would, Mr. Chair, is that while we're willing to increase funding for vouchers, are we willing to increase the funding for those at-risk children that are in the public school system? Are we cutting back? And there are some provisions in our budget that is literally cutting funding to public schools.
And that's exactly why I'm voting for this bill, because it does precisely that. The time has expired. Any other member wish to speak on? Yes, the gentlewoman from Illinois is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a real concern with this bill on many reasons, but one of the things that I'm deeply concerned about is that this bill has problems, is problematic for the disability and intellectual needs community because many of the private schools can opt to not serve students with special needs and often don't have the resources to meet the needs of students with special needs. This is not an option for the public school system, and I would hope that we would want in the District of Columbia, or indeed anywhere in this great nation, the ability of children who have special needs, children who need a little extra help, to be able to go to the schools that they want and not be subject to whether or not they win a lottery or the school accepts them. And I just think that there's some real problems with this bill. I don't think Congress should be in the business of I wouldn't want Congress to come to Hoffman Estates, Illinois, where I live, and tell my families how to run local schools. You know, I think D.C. families should have some respect, the same respect. If they want private school vouchers programs, the D.C. families can create one themselves without Congress doing it for them. I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to the gentlewoman, the delegate for the District of Columbia, Mrs. Norton.
I thank the amount, the funds that the District of, we're very proud that the district decided to reform its schools, and in doing so, invested heavily in underinvestment in the D.C. public schools. The city has been cited as a result for the most significant increase in math and reading schools in the country, and its enrollment in public schools is up for the first time in 40 years. That was an investment well worth making. The chairman indicated or tried to indicate that the funds for these schools are entirely separate funds. Nonsense. The Congress, as I speak, is cutting $2 billion from our public schools. So it is impossible to argue that somehow that money was dropped in from someplace else. It obviously comes from the federal budget, and it is impossible to reconcile with such a huge cut in the public schools of the United States of America. And I thank the gentlelady for yielding.
Thank you for reclaiming my time. I'm a graduate of a public school, and at a time when my family was going through significant financial crisis. In fact, I was on the school lunch and school breakfast program, and indeed, 80% of my fellow students in our neighborhood school were. Thank God that neighborhood school was there. My family simply didn't have the resources for even the 25-cent bus fare for me to go to a different school. It had to be a school that I could walk to, and that school was a sanctuary. It was there, and thank God it was there, because as my colleague Ms. Lawrence has said, we need to make sure that these schools are there throughout our nation for the kids who are not born into families with great resources, so that you have the opportunity, no matter where you come from, and your ability to be successful should not depend on whether or not you're lucky enough to win a voucher, a lottery to get into a school that has such limited attendance that it has to run lottery programs. I also am, again, I'd like to reiterate my deep concern for children with special needs whose needs are often not addressed either because the charter schools choose to opt out of the programs or because they simply do not have the capacity to address the needs of children with special needs, something that our public schools certainly are there to provide for. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlewoman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Walberg, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my mind, as I'm listening to the comments here, and again, we're talking about the D.C. school system. We're talking about, as was already mentioned by one of my colleagues, a city that is not a city unto itself. It is a city that is the seat of government. It is the United States special city, the district that we work from, and we have the responsibility to make sure that the young people in the room that are here today, that have had opportunities put before them that have benefited them, but all others in the District of Columbia have similar opportunities, if they would choose that, to benefit them educationally. In the words of the Northwest Ordinance, which is also found in the Michigan Constitution and probably several other constitutions, it says, religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. Schools, means of education, that seems to set a fairly great latitude in place for finding whatever works best to educate our citizenry. To educate them for what? So that they would be productive citizens, that they have their needs met academically, but it would flow into their happiness in the future. The dignity of work, the dignity of being prepared to do whatever would be their sweet spot in life. For our country, at the federal level, to stand in the way of the diversity, the opportunity, the choice, the decision-making opportunities for parents and for students alike is unconscionable. That is not our responsibility. We are to encourage schools and the means of education. And when we look at school districts in Michigan, and I was involved in the state legislature in putting through legislation that tried to bring some type of parity between the funding for students in our public school systems, to give similar opportunity, whether it be Detroit Public School System or Jackson Public School System or Tipton Public School System, that students would have opportunities. And so to see a voucher system that gives young people and their families the opportunity to expand their choice to meet the needs of them as individuals in unique ways just makes all good sense. It doesn't take away, it adds to. It doesn't discourage some at the benefit of others, it encourages all. Isn't that what we're about? Or are we about simply holding on to a design that we feel comfortable with, or we gain support from, or has the loudest mouthpiece? Does that benefit education, opportunity, schools, and the means of education, and ultimately the happiness of mankind? I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that it doesn't. And what we are doing today is necessary. It won't be for everybody. I'm a product of public education. My mother was a public school teacher. A daughter-in-law of mine is a public school teacher. 3 aunts were public school teachers and 1 librarian who shh me a lot. But my kids were products of public schools, private schools, and home schools. My children. Why? Because I had a choice. I had a choice. And I made those choices along with my wife with the best interests of our kids at that time in their life. But we had the choice. Other families are not being given that same choice for various reasons that we won't go into. But this is an opportunity to give some more choice than they've had before and build upon the success that we've heard about in the room today and will hear about in the days to come, and we will cost nothing except greater opportunity for our students. And so, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this responsibility we have for the District of Columbia, given to us by the Constitution. I take it seriously, and I take it seriously today because we are doing the right thing for these young people and others like them, and parents who only care about their kids having the opportunity. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Pleskett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I feel I would be remiss in not responding on this, never mind as a delegate as well from a territory that Congress has an obligation to, but as a mother of 5 children, some of whom have gone to public schools, and some who have gone to schools here in the District of Columbia. I think it's very interesting that we talk about choice for some, but we do not open up choice for all students. And that's an issue that I think our delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton, the Congresswoman from the District of Columbia, would probably know better than anybody in this committee, because she has represented these people of the District of Columbia and done it so in a profound way, and has spoken with the District Council, who are elected by the residents of the District of Columbia, and they have spoken as to what they want. And I think it's really improper for this Congress to override the wishes, once again, of the people of the District of Columbia. And when those on this dais talk about the responsibility, and indeed it's an obligation of Congress to the District of Columbia, as well as to the other territories, we only pick and choose which obligations we want to take on. And we've decided that voucher programming is one that will benefit some of us in terms of how we bring it back to our own districts and talk about what we stand for. But we completely abdicate our responsibility to the people of the District of Columbia and the rest of the territories in other areas. Let's talk about funding for Ward 8. Let's talk about funding for Ward 7. We don't want to do that, but we want to talk about voucher programs and spend an inordinate amount of time trying to find funding for something that the people, the majority of the people have said they don't want. Now, if some are in favor of vouchers, I think if we are going to do that, we have to expand the pot of money for those children and their families who are not going to be able to have the choice of going to a voucher system. I think that would be the fair and equitable thing and the responsible obligation of this Congress to those people. I yield the balance of my time.
Thank the gentlewoman. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, the gentlewoman is recognized.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I simply want to add my voice to that of some of my colleagues here who have spoken out on a couple of issues regarding this voucher bill. Number one, obviously, the disrespect that is shown the District of Columbia, not by not listening to the District of Columbia and what it does not want for its students, but not even asking and inserting ourselves upon them. And number two is I do believe that our obligation is to ensure that all children, irrespective of their zip codes, get the best, most globally competitive education that we in the United States of America could offer. Our standing educationally on the international stage has declined over the years, and we have a significant investment that we should be making. I really do not believe that the route to that pathway is a voucher program on several levels, including the fact that we note that the majority of people who are taking advantage of the vouchers are attending parochial schools. It's not the public's responsibility to uphold schools that have not been able to survive on their own. And it's not our responsibility to pick and choose and eliminate thousands while we just try to provide exceptional opportunities for a few. Every child that's sitting here today and every child that is represented just by the face of the child that is sitting here today deserves the very best from us. And so we need to get to work and reauthorize the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And we need to ensure that the resources that we apply and the expectations that we apply and the opportunities that we apply associated with that reauthorization provides all of our children an excellent, globally qualified, globally competitive education, irrespective of where he or she lives. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Would the gentlelady yield?
I would, yes, Mr. Chairman, I would yield my time back to Mrs. Eleanor Holmes Norton.
I want to thank the gentlelady for her remarks. Indeed, I want to thank all of my colleagues who've spoken up here today. What you have been speaking for is essentially for the same kind of home rule and local control that you yourselves enjoy. And there's an irony when my friend from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Plaskett, pointed out, because we struggle with the other delegates to make sure that we get far more equal equality in the benefits that they receive. But it's ironic to note that the territories, and the District of Columbia is a little different. It's not a territory, it's a district, whatever that means. But the territories are free to enact their own legislation without congressional intervention. They of course have no vote the way we have no vote, final vote, although they have a vote here in this committee. But on legislation affecting their schools, they are free to do what they want to do. That is all the District of Columbia is asking for here today. And I thank all of my colleagues who have supported me and have supported local control for the District of Columbia, and yield back.
Would the gentlelady yield?
The gentlewoman from New Jersey yields back. Does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, just real quickly, move to strike the
Gentleman
last
from
word.
Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes.
I would just ask one question. How bad does it have to get before you give some people choice? $19,000, 58%. Does it have to go to 50% before we give these kids a chance? 40%? 30%? Or do we have to get to the point where we're spending $20,000 and no one's graduating? So at what point do you give choice? Right? That's all we're asking. And I hear home rule. How about the homes these kids come from? Their moms and dads have decided this is a better opportunity for their child. That's the power of this concept. And you know what typically happens? In places where you create choice, the public schools get better because they have to. It happened in Cleveland, Ohio. It happens all over the country when we do this. So ask that, how bad does it have to get before you let some get a better opportunity? And why not, when you're given a better opportunity, go right to the ultimate, go right to the family and say, we're going to let moms and dads put their kid in the school they think's best going to serve their needs. I yield back.
Well, I wasn't going to, gentleman yield? Thank you. I listened to what you just said, and I just wanted to just add some things here. The purpose of the amendment, I want to go back to the purpose of the amendment, is to ensure that schools that enroll voucher students can sustain themselves based on the quality of education they offer and not merely their access to federally funded tuition payments. As Congresswoman Norton stated, if the underlying issue behind the base bill is a concept of choice, then we should recognize that the District of Columbia is the home to one of the country's most robust and effective public charter school systems. D.C. charter schools offer parents many high-quality alternative public school options. As I understand it, the district has more than 100 charter schools, and they are responsible for educating approximately 37,000 students, which is about 44% of the city's school-age population. Additionally, the district's charter schools are open to D.C. students of all ages and abilities, regardless of their neighborhood or of residence or economic status. Representative Norton's amendment also speaks to the importance of supporting the city's recent efforts to transform its traditional public schools. Since 2003, scores for district public school students in the 4th grade have increased as much as 15 points, the second highest gain in the nation when compared to other large urban areas. The district is also the only major city to see double-digit growth in its secondary students' reading and math scores over the most recent 3 years. Recent educational reforms in the city have resulted in learning innovations, improved curriculums, and specialized projects. Some of these innovative programs include the Catalyst World Culture and Linguistic program at Payne Elementary School and the Advancement Placement and International Baccalaureate Diploma program at Banneker High School. It takes resources to make these strides, and the amendment offered by Representative Norton will help to maximize available resources by focusing funding on public education, which benefits all of the district students. And so I urge my colleagues, and I ask them to join me in supporting the gentlelady's amendment. And with that,
Mr. Chairman?
I yield back to the gentleman.
Yeah, I would just point out that all those wonderful stats that the ranking member pointed out, I think make my point. This program's been going on, and when you have competition, it improves the public school. Just made my point.
Stop that. Stop that.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to be heard on this amendment? If not, the question is now on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from the District of Columbia. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other further amendments to the bill? Gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment at the desk from the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows.
Amendment to H.R. 10 offered by Mr. Meadows.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment, and without objection, the amendment is considered as read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think it's good that we've had this robust debate this morning, but let us not make any mistakes. It is critical that as we debate this particular issue, it is really about the lives and the homes of students that we face in the audience and many more like them this morning. Continuing this program certainly is something that I think, as the ranking member was pointing out, all the wonderful successes of the public school. I'd also like to point out that this program has been in place, and so it obviously has had no adverse effect on the public schools. And so if the public schools are doing well, and this program has been in existence, I see no harm in continuing it. It doesn't take away any federal funds from our public schools. In fact, it augments those. So my amendment is very simple. It is really designed to take the relevant information, test scores, and the like, and make sure that those are transferred into the new evaluation process working with the Department of Education and others, so that we have a thorough evaluation. Because I believe that this program indeed, this scholarship program indeed does help students here in the District of Columbia, and that it's in the best interest of those students to use reliable and complete data as we consider the program's future. As you know, we had a hearing that we heard unbelievable testimony that would bring tears to the eyes of even the most hardened member of Congress as they heard the successes of this program. We were able to see moms in the audience who beamed at the pride of their student being able to articulate the wonderful benefits. And so I think it's important, my amendment speaks to that issue, to make sure that we take all of those evaluation tools, roll them into any future evaluations so that we can make informed decisions as we move forward. And I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, which is aimed at protecting the rigor and integrity of the OSP evaluation. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. I would now recognize the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton.
Well, I thank my good friend from North Carolina. At the very least, we ought to track the current students, I deeply regret that we will not track them in the same way they were tracked before, with a controlled study that measures like students against like students, but there's some kind of undefined new experimental design apparently trying to make sure one gets different results. The reason you track students is because you really want to find out whether they are progressing. We don't know how many students drop out. We will not know even now. We have almost no accountability. So to have nothing that track them would be even worse. So what this does is say that current students, who I remind you, I was always for remaining in the program until they graduate, will also be tracked. But as you evaluate those students, you will have to take into account that the new experimental design, which found no increases in math and science tests, will have to be measured against this new experimental design, which remains undefined. I do not oppose this amendment because something is better than nothing, and we would have been left perhaps with no way to know anything about these students. Again, I congratulate these students, all of whom are my constituents, say I wish you the very best, and believe that if you continue as you are now, you will complete your education at the private schools that you are attending. And I want to say once again that your schools are very different from the schools described in my amendment. There are other children in schools which are only there because there is some federal money. St. Anthony's and our other Catholic schools are good examples of schools that have been there for the long haul, and I have always supported them. I have particularly supported them because the Catholic schools have kept running, even though this is a Baptist town, but they stayed up as long as they could. And I want to thank the church for when they got to the point where some of their schools could not be left, and they had to close down some of the schools. Catholic Church came to the District of Columbia and said, rather than give up on the education we have been providing in these neighborhoods, they asked the District of Columbia to make them, to relieve them of their church affiliation, make them charter schools so that they could remain in the District of Columbia. That, it seems to me, is the spirit of those schools, and I applaud those and the schools that are represented here among my constituents. I yield back.
Would the gentlewoman yield?
I just yielded back.
The gentlewoman has yielded back. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes and yield to the gentleman from North Carolina.
I thank the chairman. I would just like to share heartfeltly, and I think the gentlewoman would know this, that I would like to express that I'd be glad to work with the gentlewoman. My amendment is designed to track many of the things that you have pointed out, does it in a very different manner than your amendment, but I'll be glad to work with you in a spirit of friendship and in supporting these families to do all we can to make sure that we have a good evaluation tool. And I yield back.
The gentleman yield.
And I'll yield to the gentleman. The gentleman yields back, and I'll yield to the gentleman from Maryland.
I just have one question for the gentleman from North Carolina. And this is just sort of connected with tracking and effective and efficient use of dollars. Does the gentleman have concerns about the issues that the gentlelady has raised with regard to these fly-by-night institutions? I'm just curious.
I thank the ranking member for his question, and certainly having an efficient and accountable system of evaluation and fly-by-nights is, the gentleman knows well that I am very tenacious in trying to make sure that we don't waste any taxpayer dollars on a number of issues. What I don't want to do, and I think that that's the stress, we can take a model that we have at higher education right now, where we have some of the similar things that you're talking about, where we have scholarships going to and federal funds going to some of these fly-by-nights, and yet we're not addressing it. What I don't want to do is arbitrarily put on a cap and put people in a lottery system where it's you today or maybe you tomorrow in trying to address this. But I sincerely will work with not only the gentleman but my good friend from D.C. to make sure that fly-by-nights are not eating at the public trough.
Look forward to working with the gentleman.
And reclaiming my time, the spirit in which I think both of you are approaching this, I encourage and look forward to. I would point out that under the bill, the accreditation has to happen within a 5-year time frame, but that most of the schools already are in that accredited category. But I think having both sides, and Mr. Meadows in North Carolina, obviously the gentleman from the District of Columbia working together on this, that's the spirit in which we approach it. And certainly anytime you can measure something, I think we'll all be better off. So with that, I will yield back. Does any other member seek time to speak on this amendment? If not, the question is now on the amendment offered by the gentleman from North Carolina. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any further amendments to the bill? The question is now on adoption and favorably reporting H.R. 10 as amended to the House of Representatives. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it.
Roll call.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chaffetz.
Aye.
Mr. Chaffetz votes aye. Mr. Mica. Mr. Turner. Mr. Duncan. Mr. Jordan. Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Walberg. Mr. Walberg votes aye. Mr. Amash. Mr. Gosar. Mr. Desjardins. Mr. Desjardins votes aye. Mr. Gowdy. Mr. Farenthold. Mrs. Lummis. Mrs. Lummis votes aye. Mr. Massey. Mr. Meadows. Mr. Meadows votes aye. Mr. DeSantis. Mr. DeSantis votes aye. Mr. Mulvaney. Mr. Mulvaney votes aye. Mr. Buck. Mr. Walker.
Aye.
Mr. Walker votes aye. Mr. Blum. Mr. Heiss. Mr. Heiss votes aye. Mr. Russell. Mr. Russell votes aye. Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter votes aye. Mr. Grothman. Mr. Hurd. Mr. Hurd votes aye. Mr. Palmer. Mr. Cummings. Mr. Cummings votes no. Mrs. Maloney. Mrs. Maloney votes no. Ms. Norton. Ms. Norton votes no. Mr. Clay. Mr. Clay votes no. Mr. Lynch. Mr. Lynch votes no. Mr. Cooper. Mr. Connolly. Mr. Cartwright. Mr. Cartwright votes no. Ms. Duckworth.
No.
Ms. Duckworth votes no. Ms. Kelly. Ms. Kelly votes no. Ms. Lawrence. Mr. Liu. Ms. Watson-Coleman. No. Ms. Watson-Coleman votes no. Ms. Plaskett. No. Ms. Plaskett votes no. Mr. Desaulnier. Mr. Desaulnier votes no. Mr. Boyle. Mr. Welch. No. Mr. Welch votes no. Ms. Lujan Grisham.
We got members already here.
How is
We got Mr. Mica.
Mr. Mica recorded?
Mr. Mica is not recorded.
Mr. Mica?
See, I spoke for it, but I pledged to vote against it. I usually keep my pledges no.
That was the amendment.
Final
Oh, so we're not on the final passage? Well, I said I was going to vote against the bill, so I have to keep my, the amendment, but I was going to vote for the bill, so I have to keep my pledge there. So I guess I'll be are they even close? Yes.
Mr. Micah votes yes.
Gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Connolly is not recorded. Mr. Connolly votes no.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Amash.
Mr. Amash is not recorded.
Mr. Amash.
Mr. Amash votes yes.
Are there any other members who wish to be recorded? There is one more member who I'm told is right here. The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar.
Mr. Gosar is not recorded.
Mr. Gosar.
Mr. Gosar votes yes.
Gentleman from Tennessee.
Mr. Cooper votes no.
Are there any other members who wish to be recorded? The clerk will report the tally.
On this vote, there are 16 ayes and 14 noes.
In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is ordered favorably reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. In consultation on both sides of the aisle and in interest of time, we're going to move the following bills under a unanimous consent agreement. If any other member wishes to offer an objection, please do so. But having consulted on both sides of the aisle, we have agreed to move these bipartisan bills expeditiously. Before I do that, at the conclusion of this, I want to thank, and Mr. Cummings can do as well, the students that have joined us for this bill. I only wish that members of Congress had the same sort of discipline you had in sitting here through this, but it was most impressive. And we truly do appreciate your participation, and again, encourage you to stay involved in your government at every level throughout your lives. So again, we thank you. If we can stay in order, we still have a business meeting that must continue on. I would ask unanimous consent that the committee adopt and favorably report the following bills to the House. H.R. 2347, the Federal Advisory Committee Act Amendments of 2015. H.R. 3231, the Federal Intern Protection Act of 2015, with an amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Mr. Cummings of Maryland. Senate Bill 1172, the Edwin Ted Kaufman and Michael Levitt Presidential Transitions Improvement Act of 2015, with an amendment in the nature of the substitute offered by myself and Mr. Cummings. Senate Bill 1576, the Representative Payee Fraud Protection Act of 2015, and the Senate Bill 1580, the Competitive Service Act of 2015, Senate Bill 1629, the District of Columbia Courts, Public Defender Service and Court Services, and Offender Supervision Agency Act of 2015. We would also add the following postal naming bills: H.R. 136, H.R. 2928, H.R. 3082, H.R. 3274, H.R. 3601, Senate Bill 1596, and Senate Bill 1826. Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman.
The Ranking Member, Mr. Cummings.
Chairman, I want to thank the Chairman, and I would like to just make a few brief remarks on one of the bills in this package that I introduced, the Federal Intern Protection Act. I want to thank you for bringing H.R. 3231 before the committee for consideration. Unpaid interns work in Federal agencies every day. They do this work to acquire experience and contacts to help them pursue their career dreams, which hopefully include working for the Federal Government. The Federal workers from whom unpaid interns are learning are protected from discrimination and sexual harassment by Federal law. Unfortunately, due to a loophole in the existing law, unpaid interns are not protected from discrimination and sexual harassment. The committee has held a number of oversight hearings on employee misconduct. In some instances, the misconduct involved the sexual harassment of interns. Witness testimony has included allegations of unwanted touching, uninvited sexual advances. And so, Mr. Chairman, having heard that testimony, now is the time to make reforms. My bill, H.R. 3231, would include interns under existing protections, making it illegal to discriminate against interns on the basis of religion, race, gender, just as it is illegal to discriminate against or harass other workers in the Federal Government on these bases. We are not creating new policy. We are simply closing a loophole in an existing one. I'm glad we were able to come together today to support the Federal Intern Protection Act, and I want to thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for working with me in a bipartisan way on this bill. The rest of the bills in this unanimous consent package are all common sense, good government reform proposals and have a bipartisan support. I urge the adoption of all of them, and I thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for your efforts.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Without objection, pursuant to Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman?
Gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you. Just real briefly, I have a unanimous consent request, but I also want to thank you and the ranking member for scheduling in this markup S-1580, the Senate version of a bill we have supported that I was proud to author, the Competitive Service Act. I would ask unanimous consent that letters of support for that bill be entered into the record from the Federal Managers Association, the Partnership for Public Service, the Professional Managers Association, and the Seniors Executive Association.
Without objection, so
I thank
ordered.
the Chair.
Thank you. Without objection, pursuant to Clause 2L of House Rule 11, members will have 2 days to submit views on the bills considered today. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be allowed to make necessary technical and conforming changes to the bills ordered reported today, subject to the approval of the minority. Hearing no objection, so ordered. If there is no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.